Yeah,
Yeah,
But
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
start. Hold on a second.
one
I'm
of
just
the
gonna
things-
start. The water plus
it was nice. So, welcome to our second monthly meeting of the Housing Advisory Committee. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. In attendance, we have Kim Britton, we have Leslie Higginbottom, Biddle, we have Tom Mabry, we have Alex Hutchinson, we have our town planner, Hiram Peck, and our CEO, Lena. First order of business is to review the minutes and approve the minutes. So hopefully everybody's had a chance. I like the fact that it's nice and short and concise. And did people have any comments, questions? You need a minute to kind of review it again?
were there any changes in this from the original?
For the minutes?
No, I'm sorry. I thought
We're on minutes, right?
The minutes, were the minutes attached? They were the next email.
I did.
Oh, one separate email.
I did send out a separate email because I forgot to attach them, but I had a link for the minutes. You're good?
Yeah.
Listen? Did you get a
Yes.
chance? Okay.
Move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Abstain. Okay, we have the minutes approved. The second
You
order,
abstained? No, it abstains.
no abstains. Four people. Second item on the agenda, or I guess it's fourth item on the agenda, but review and approval of the committee charter. So I did not receive comments from anybody. I know, Hiram, you made one or two comments. But at this point, it sits as is. And obviously, once it gets formally approved, we'll have it reproduced so that it takes off the membership list and the meeting schedule reference, so that it's just the formal charter. So any comments, questions, discussion people have about this? And by the way, this isn't in stone. If we feel as we get into it, we need to revisit it, we can. So it's, it is intended to be a guide for us. So that if we start to wander too far off course, we can kind of go back and say, well, wait a minute. This isn't really what we'd laid out. And again, if we feel that that new course we're charting is a better, more appropriate, we can always amend it.
I thought it was good in the sense that it's clear about our role in relation to planning and zoning, and clear about trying to keep the affordability question embedded in the discussion.
Right.
So from my point of view, I thought it was fine. I don't know.
I really do envision that, as I've described to other people who've asked about it, this is the group that can do the heavy lifting to dig into issues that the commission probably would love to get into, but just doesn't have the time, and the bandwidth to be able to do that. So the extent that we can do some of the legwork and then be able to bring that back for their review, discussion, and consideration is what I think our best value can be in the process. So everybody's good with this. We have a motion to approve.
Is there anything Hiram saw that he wanted to advise?
No,
differently?
I think with, as Alex said, Leslie, I think that, it's a great place to start. I think if things shift or move a little bit later on, we can always take a look at it at that point in time. But
Okay,
I think it's a good working start. Absolutely. Yeah.
then I'll be happy to move it.
Okay. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, Tom, thank you. Any other discussions, comments?
I like that it's a sustainable housing plan because I think people see affordable housing and just, you know,
It, why introduce a
Right.
potential hot button word when it doesn't need to be?
it's there. I mean, it says affordable housing plan.
Correct, and this will be the basis. Hopefully, whatever gets produced out of this will feed back into the commission, developing and approving any amendments or updates to the affordable housing plan. So. Okay, well, those in favor of adopting the charter? Aye,
Okay.
opposed? Abstentions, so unanimous approval? We don't have Lauren online, right?
No, nobody has been yet.
You want me to text it?
Okay, so we got the business end of it, everything out of the way. So this is really the meat of our discussion for today, and I talked to Hiram, and I thought it might be helpful for him to be able to provide us with some perspective of what he's seen around the state, what other towns are doing, things that might be relevant and good for us to be aware of, so that my hope is if it's not at this meeting, by the end of the next meeting, we have sort of identified one or more specific areas we'd really like to dive into. And then that way we can start to divvy up who would like to take the lead on certain types of things. So with that, Hiram, I'm going to turn it over to you and
Happy to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on around the state. And of course, as probably all know, the legislature's still in session, so anything's possible. So we'll just keep an eye on that, and Lena's watching that carefully as well, so things come up that would affect the issue one way or the other, that will kind of keep on top of it. One town that I'm working with recently, we had decided, similar committee had decided to have a forum, a kind of a public forum about the issues in general. One of the things that I thought was really helpful in that particular session, number one, it wasn't too long. Number two, it didn't focus on a particular issue. It talked about housing in general and mix of housing and housing diversity in the town. The key that was really important was that the speaker that came, it wasn't me, it was somebody from outside who was very well versed in the issue and understood exactly how to present the issue to a variety of people that may be pro, may be con, but it was very, very helpful. And I think it was worthwhile doing. And I would just suggest to this group that might be something we want to consider doing fairly soon. I don't know if any of you have come in contact with Ben Fink at COGS.
I kind of guessed that might have been Ben.
Yeah, well, it wasn't Ben, it was his father.
Is David.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
David, and David was great. He gets it. He came in before, 5 minutes before, he said, okay, what am I gonna expect? And we kind of briefed him, and he knew exactly. And because of that, I think he very even-handedly presented the issue. People that said, well, I don't even know what affordable housing is. What is all this about, you know? And he can kind of answer that question in certain ways that were very helpful. So I think that's one thing that I would tell you to think about, and I think that, you know, within the next couple of months, we could probably put that together. Ben has been back in charge, you know, in touch with us a couple of times, saying, let me know when you're ready, we can do that. So, and I think having listened to a couple of his webinar presentations, he's very even-handed with regard to how he presents things as
So
well.
it's Ben or not David?
Both of them, frankly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so for everybody, and again, I've been sitting in on the regional planning SCROG, so South Central Regional
Council of Governments.
Ben, well, David's been at a number of meetings and Ben has been there, and Ben, are people familiar with Ben Fink? You are, okay. So Ben really is sort of focused on how do you engage the broader community in the discussion, without getting into shutting down one viewpoint versus another. It's really how to facilitate a discussion, and a conversation to get to a point where there's a mutual understanding, not necessarily agreement, but a mutual understanding. So, you know, what Hiram's talking about, I've been to a couple of Ben's sessions about how you listen and how, you know, do you try to engage? So it may be something that would be worthwhile.
So I don't know what the current exact relationship is between David Fink, who was originally the Sprague person, and Ben. But anyway, if you decide you want to do something like that, certainly can talk about it. And David's always been very, very willing to come and talk to folks and.
In my experience, David too has this, because he's older, he's sort of avuncular, like a kindly uncle talking, and he has so many ears behind him.
Yeah.
If somebody asks him a question, he's never flustered. He
Yeah.
always has
Yeah.
some kind of constructive
Yeah.
answer. So I'd lean toward him just because he has the content side.
Good point.
Ben may too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, David starts off by telling people how old he is, and
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm older than you are.
That
Anyway.
helps, you know, it's
But it gets people kind of
just
saying,
arms.
yeah, exactly.
Now, David indicated that he is retiring from his role, by June, I think, or something like that.
He said that 5 years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah.
before COVID. So I wouldn't-
So this is,
But what
his
is
third or fourth go around on
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah, and he's worked with a lot of towns all over the state, so I think it's been very, very helpful. So that's one thing I think that, take a look at. One of the other things that I did a little while ago was to ask Lena to put together a list of all the properties in town that are not developed, all the vacant properties. That's something that I think we need to be careful about right now, but I think we need to know what that map looks like. So that we can take a look at certain properties that we think, you know, something in this area might be good, it might work well. We don't want to upset anybody at this particular point in time. We haven't actually created that map yet. We do have the list. But I did create that map for another town. I think it's very helpful because there are properties that pop up that you never thought, well, gee, I never even thought about that one. What's going on over there? Now, obviously for us, there's no sewer really involved. So we really don't have to worry about that so much, but just things, context, I guess is what I would say that we want to look at fairly soon.
Lena, where do we stand? Do you move forward with trying to get the GIS done, or are you still waiting for a quote? Or?
Let me help her out. She asked me a bunch of questions after we put that list together. And I didn't give her those answers yet.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, we can create a colorful map. We can create a map that shows A, B, and C, and the more we do and the more complex it gets, the more expensive it gets.
I mean, from my point of view, I'd like to do basics so that we can share it with everybody. And again, if there's a particular thing that we want to focus on where a more enhanced map makes sense. But my presumption is we have to bring that back to the Board of Selectmen or somebody to, I don't know if it's commission or Board of Selectmen, because we'd actually be spending town money to do that, right?
Yeah, my suggestion on that would be you get the commission to at least talk about it a little bit. So we can find out if we've got a good basis there to go back to the Board of Selectmen and then go to the Board of Selectmen.
Is this a document that we would use as a working group, as a committee to educate ourselves?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Here at this table
I think
and then
that's
share
great,
it, so, because I think the audience kind of is the question of how fancy it needs to be or whatever.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, if it's a working thing, just so that we learn, then it can be as simple and as inexpensive as we
Yeah.
can make it.
Yeah,
How expensive is it?
I don't know yet because we have never gotten back to the GIS.
No.
Did you turn in a
the-
budget for planning and zoning?
So we
Yeah.
had the whole list of it, and then was sent out to GIS. And they were asking what type of map we do. We want it like a simplistic map, or do we want it a little more,
Simplistic.
detailed map? But because we have not yet conversed about, how farther into what details you really want, we have not got, and that's what depends on that.
So my sense is that we tell them simple is a good place to start.
They're helpful.
Very,
My
very simple.
sister and I are looking for property in Massachusetts
Mhm.
for my son,
Mhm.
who's currently living in Oregon. and GIS are available there. Basic GIS with overlays for free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we've been using them, they're great help.
Yeah, what town are you looking at?
Berkshire County.
Oh,
Southern
okay,
Berkshire County.
Yeah.
Yeah,
great, that would be a big help. I'm sure.
they're great to use.
Yeah,
Now, if I recall, the initial spreadsheet we kind of put together,
Mhm.
we sent out to Hiram and myself.
Yeah,
Was it basically two different components? One is publicly owned by the town. And then there was private, could be land trust, it could be other types of things.
Mm.
Are those the only two? I mean, if they're individual property lots owned by a single person, that's not
but
part of what we're
private, no,
looking at.
that's the only,
Yeah.
the only, things were like anything that was town owned or vacant lots that were, related, that could be occupied, but not private owned properties, no.
Okay.
Not gonna know.
Can I ask you what's happening with Greenhaven, AKA whatever?
Good question. I think it's, the last time I asked, they were QVC had granted, permits for the septic and they were digging
Still under the veterans? or-
for the, yeah, they still were, but nothing in regards to the people that were originally advocating for funds for that.
Right.
It's still under the bank.
the bank still own it?
As far as I know, it's
Yeah,
still the
they
bank
haven't
owns
closed
it.
it.
Hasn't been closed, not, because I have inquired about it at the town clerk's office as well. The ownership has not changed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
not yet.
So friends of my
Usually
wife,
they give me the list of new
Yeah.
owned properties, transfer their names and
So-
titles. So,
some friends of ours that live at the very end of Myers Road in Boston,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
they noted that there was a drilling rig up there, so
yes.
I know at one
That must be
point
good too,
about the
Yes,
water
that's what it
supply.
was, yeah.
So again, is the bank paying somebody to come in and start to finish that, or?
That I do not know how that will goes, but as far as I know, the first thing I heard is because somebody walked into the office like somebody's drilling there. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I had to call QVHD and ask what's happening, and then they told me that they have been granted a permit for that.
Okay,
As far as, but do not know who's being sponsoring
Well, if
that.
the bank owns it, it's either the bank,
Yeah.
has a developer doing something, or the bank is doing it,
Yeah.
right itself.
The bank hired Bob Wiedemann, who's a
Yeah.
builder, and Bob is actually very straightforward guy, very honorable guy. To sort of get through all these particular issues that they had before, whether it was water, whether it was
Mhm.
septic, whatever. I suspect that Bob is, and it's still working, and I talk to him frequently, I can ask him the question.
Yeah, I meant to call him at one point, but
yeah, I don't know if he
He
is
still is
involved,
the
and again,
owner.
it's very, very confusing, when they had their ribbon cutting. That everybody kind of thought was an informational session, and I know I went there, and it was a PR, it was basically. We're getting up here, we're doing this for our vets, thank you very much. So the guy that's leading the group that wants to buy it, I can't remember his name.
they were Mark Darius is one of the owners,
Yeah.
Darius I can't
But
pronounce
he
his
was
last name.
talking about the fact that
Sorry.
he's been a developer, contractor, everything. And just making comments about, yeah, we're on top of it. We got the water thing figured out. We know what we're doing. Very, very cocky and dismissive about it. They've been done,
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means that Bob has been displaced now by
Yeah.
or the bank is figuring, we'll let this guy, since he wants to buy it, let him do what he wants to do. I don't know what to do.
Next day or two, let me give Bob a call and just find out what
Yeah.
he said. He's very straightforward.
Yeah.
Just because that's, someplace that's already approved, started,
Facts are.
Bob's,
The room.
Bob's, number.
Oh, and I mean, the rumor mill says that they have a GoFundMe going, but
Yeah,
if they have a GoFundMe going, they're never gonna get
No,
anywhere with that.
Right. I mean, that's unfortunately from day one, that was the problem, is nobody that knew what the heck they were really doing from day
yeah,
one. Had all that figured out.
Mhm.
If they had known where the rock was, then they had known what they were gonna have to do for the water authority, they would have been much better off. would have been done a long time ago.
Would have saved a lot of us, a lot of. Should have.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's an asset in a sense, and where it is now.
Well, it could
It's a- I mean, it's a potential asset compared to some.
Right. And
In a
the
positive way.
units are pretty nice inside.
Oh, they're
Very,
gorgeous.
very nice.
Right, we all went when they had the.
Yeah.
I went to the.
House.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, it would be perfect for the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Mhm.
And I know it would be something that more than one senior I've talked to is interested.
Would welcome, it's got the common
Some of them
spaces,
know.
which is in the requirement for elderly.
Yeah, I mean-
But they came back, I think, and changed one of the common space to three other units,
Two or three.
two or three other
So there's
units.
none left, because if you have an age restricted,
I mean,
it has to have. common
I think in
space.
It depends
total,
if they
they
changed
would
it.
end up 33 units,
The original plan, I think it was for 30.
30.
30.
They used to come to,
With the common room, but they wanted to take that common room and make 3 additional.
I think it
living
was
units.
33, so it might have been
Okay.
under 36.
Yeah,
And I,
well, I'm just saying, it's.
So I
And
remember
I-
right.
and I think they were, I think that you mentioned like 8 or 10, about 14 units, possibly. to
Yeah,
be-
affordable. It doesn't
Right.
mean it- Unless the money gets returned to the state.
Yeah.
don't the affordable units
Yeah.
actually get
But a lot of
purchased?
them were two-story.
I know.
I think all of the
They're-
affordable ones
Yeah.
under the
Yeah.
previous regime were spoken for.
Yes.
Yeah,
But now that the bank's taken it over, and I don't know whether the people that put their name in for the affordable housing, I mean, this thing is.
If
dragged
they
on
have
forever.
priority, they probably all found other housing at this
Yeah.
point. I think that from the financing structure, because this was my world from before. If you go ahead and develop it, even a bank can't supersede the public funding that went in it. They have to either honor it or repay it. So I have no idea what the new developer or what the
Mhm.
bank is going to do.
Mhm.
They, from a financial perspective, they would maximize their profit by paying back the state the money that they put into it and
Mhm.
going to the marketplace for
Mhm.
these units probably.
Mhm.
But for now, if that money is still silently in the deal, there would be a percentage that would have to be affordable. So,
Well, again, this gentleman indicated that they would honor that.
Yeah.
That-
and that would make more sense because you'd keep that money into the deal,
Right,
but.
I remember going to a meeting one time, one of those state meetings, and one of the ladies from the housing department approached and asked about it, and I think she had been approached about some sort of grants to support that project, and at one point I thought the housing department was interested in the whole.
Well, they did give money. This
Yeah.
was a state department of housing that
Yeah.
invested originally.
I mean, quite honestly, one of the things that if this thing continues not to be closed, that the bank still owns it. And I don't know if this be through the commission, the board of selectmen, us,
Right.
but it would be great to have a conversation with the bank to let them
Mhm.
be aware of what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah.
And that this could be a wonderful opportunity.
I mean,
The
just
bank
be-
obviously wants to get its
Is it
money back.
financed? Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing about that is
This is
that I always thought that there was room to expand that development.
Yeah, it was like 30 to start,
So
or
I-
33.
whether that would ever, once we find out where things are going here, maybe we
Yeah.
can sort of take a look at the idea about that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
It's already there.
the major issue there was the water and the septic. Really,
Yeah.
The water would
Leaching
be the
fields, yeah.
biggest limiting factor.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Hiram, to your point, I don't know whether what they're doing is strictly to accommodate the 33 or how many are there. Or whether, because if there's a whole new water system has to go in.
Yep.
That adds significant additional costs.
Yeah. Well, there were all kinds of issues, and without getting into a lot of detail tonight, there were a lot of issues with regard to the fact that when the water system was originally designed, it met code.
Mm.
They
But
changed the code.
the regional water authority decided they didn't want a Chevrolet, they wanted a Cadillac.
Yeah.
And that just broke the budget, so that was hard.
Mhm.
So, let me couple more quick things I will tell you. Some of the other towns that have been working on these things have done a lot of changes to their existing zoning regulations. Some of them have changed lot sizes, for example. I have to tell you that I'm sure, I think that in this town, that if we muck with lot sizes a lot, we're gonna get a lot of pushback.
Mm.
My thinking is that what we really ought to do is take a look at that map of properties that are available and figure out what we can do on those properties with regard to changing density, maybe a special regulation, for example. Not something that's gonna affect existing neighborhoods. That's one of the things.
But question on that.
Yeah.
So we have in our regs right now, elderly housing districts,
Mhm.
we have housing opportunity development districts, and we have attainable housing overlay zones.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, that we don't want to particularly make that our leading effort on this is we want to go in and change 2 acre zoning to this and that. But would we have a lot more the commission have a lot more flexibility if if they designate these zones to be able to go in and say that there'll be different zoning or requirements and regs?
I think that we have, that was gonna be kind of my next point, Alex. I think that we have a good basis in the existing regulations to do that.
Yeah.
I think we do. I think it's a matter of sort of matching where the land is available and plugging which regulation will be best for that particular area. I think that that's there. So just wanted to,
Can I ask a question? Are any of the smallish towns sort of like us dealing at all with an inclusionary zone? That's a pretty much urban thing, but I didn't know whether over time, you know, if the developer were to do something that they have to include affordable units if the development is over a certain number, which hasn't been our way of developing
Yeah.
Bethany traditionally, but I just, you know, it would have in fact addressed something like Greenhead, that if they hadn't wanted to do it that way, it would have required them to do something like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know of any small towns, if that makes any sense at all.
yeah, a couple things. Town of Marlboro, which is
Yeah.
fairly rural.
Yeah.
Did something the other night. They increased the inclusionary zoning in their regulations from 10 to 15%. So if a development came in that was, I don't know, more than 8 units or more than 10 units or whatever it was, they would get more inclusionary units out of it. The thing with inclusionary zoning that always is a question mark for me
Yeah,
is that if you're gonna make it less profitable for the developer,
Mhm.
they're gonna come in with something that's 7 units or 6 units or 5 units.
to try to avoid
Just
it.
to avoid that.
Yeah,
The other sort of extreme is that in Darien a few years ago, they have an inclusionary zoning regulation as well.
Mm.
But in that particular situation, they allow the developer to buy their way out of it.
they give money to another group that is gonna do an affordable unit somewhere else,
Yeah.
and so the same dollars come to.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I really didn't think it fits a community like Bethany, to be honest. It may be a dense suburban or
Yeah, yeah.
urban, because volume is part of the development
Yeah.
process, whereas here.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
I
So,
agree with you, Leslie. I think if we come up with plans for particular pieces of property that fit those properties, that can be sort of backed up by the existing regulations and we can get support for that, I think that's the best way to do it. And at least sort of.
Could that be presented as this is specific for this?
Yeah.
Property.
Oh, yes, it would be. Yeah,
Entire-
it would be. That's
Yeah.
what zones do.
And that's-
They're over the top. They only are that zone. They're not
Okay.
anywhere else.
Become
Okay.
that.
And people relax, you know, like, oh, you're not coming to my neighborhood?
Yeah.
What's the definition of inclusionary zone?
Inclusionary zoning means that if you have a development, let's say you have a subdivision of 10 lots, you can say, if you adopt inclusionary zoning, which is in the state statutes, and I forget the number now, but if you adopt that, you can make a certain percentage of those affordable units.
You have to be required to do it, actually, in order to get a density bonus, or if you're building over a certain amount. So the town actually, by approving inclusionary zoning in their regs, is requiring any developer of 10 units or more to include affordable units of a certain type.
Yeah.
So it has to be more than so many units.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think of Bethany.
And we don't really, we're not seeing subdivisions really
Is it
anymore
always
right
greater than
now
10 or
anyway,
no?
so. we're not- we're just
No,
seeing
not
that.
really, because like the city of Norwalk or the city of Stamford does it for huge
Lot of-
properties, you know,
Yeah,
too.
a lot of Fairfield County towns do it.
Yeah,
That's
a lot
where
of
the density
Fairfield, a
is.
lot of, but they're super, they're, you know, 50,000 people with major multi-story buildings going.
Right.
But to get back to the other part of your question, which I think is a really good question, is there are a lot of towns in Litchfield County, which are very similar to Bethany, and they have been doing some really cool things.
Yeah.
There are a group of people and Jocelyn Air
Yeah,
is
it's great.
is a fantastic person, good planner. And they have a number, I think in Litchfield County, they have 18 projects going on right now.
Mhm,
And small, single-family units in a lot of places.
mhm.
Very well-designed units, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units. And those are really well done.
Mhm.
I think that they're very careful. They're not aggressive about how they do this. They work with the towns to figure out where would you want to see this? What do you want to see it look like? What do you think the density would be and so on? So I think that there are a number of good examples in towns like Bethany where this would fit really well. And I think if we did have some sort of a forum, we could show some of these pictures of things that have been done in places, other towns, Litchfield County, that are very nice.
What they have in those places are small town resident nonprofit groups
Yep.
that sponsor them. They don't do the actual building, but they are part of the community. So like in Norfolk, they bought 3 older homes, one of which was historic, and they worked with a consultant to package the financing, and it's all affordable rentals. But nothing looks different on the outside. Nobody
Mhm.
goes by and says, oh, that's affordable.
Mm.
It's just part of the town. And they had decided, the town decided we need a few more family rentals. So, I mean, it's that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And there
So
are a number of small towns.
Where do they
doing it.
get their funding to do that? You say that they're nonprofits.
Yeah, the
that-
nonprofits
so-
simply means they don't get a profit out of this process, but they do get professional development help. There are there's a whole sort of private, not public, not government, private, not-for-profit consultants who help groups figure it out, help them get a builder, help them package the financing, do all that kind of stuff. And
Are the
And
groups
grants.
that do this, the builders?
no,
No.
they're just gonna be the owners if it's rental. In the long term, they're gonna own the 4 houses or something.
Okay,
Or if they do a condo or a single family house, they sell to a homeowner, they help the homeowner. But they're nonprofits, so this is what I did in my former life, was create those organizations, and it's really good because it comes from inside the community. It's
well, I,
I think that's the best way to do it in a town like Bethany.
it
The
can
last,
work.
the last thing we want is a housing authority, I think, housing authority,
Oh, no.
it would not be accepted easily.
Mhm.
Number 2, it can get really out of control. It's a tremendous
Politically
burden.
messy. Yeah.
So I think that those types of organizations are exactly where we need to look for the type of thing we.
And each town is different. I mean, we're very similar to other ones, but we're all proud of the thing we have, and it's local.
Yeah.
So it's locally controlled.
are you aware of any either nonprofit developers?
Sure.
Or
Mhm.
are you familiar with the B Corp
Yeah,
type?
yeah.
They're for profit, but they're not obligated to distribute the profits.
Right.
They can reinvest the
Right.
profits. So you
Yeah,
are,
this is what I did for a living.
I definitely want to. I definitely want
I
to.
care when it's successful,
Yeah.
It's,
Okay,
I financed a number of them, and I did a lot of the local groups, and then helped them find the right kind of help to do it.
And I think that's exactly the direction that we need to go in here. I really do. I think that's in terms of size, in terms of complexity, in terms of acceptance in the community, that kind of thing.
Well, I think the degree to which you could find out from Jocelyn, or probably already, are there things in their zoning regulations in the Litchfields or the Warrens or Norfolks or the Kents or the Cornwalls, all those places that are doing that kind of things in their zoning regulations that they have to help support that we don't.
Mhm.
Whereas what we have as a structure, pretty good, it's just a question of whether, anything will actually be built.
along those lines, I mean, are they doing this within some of these
Yeah.
various districts?
Mm.
So a district has been set aside and now
Yeah,
these
I don't
groups
know.
are coming in and.
Is what you're modeling only with existing homes?
Well, the ones I've liked have often been because they don't stand out in the community. They just sort of, they name the tavern. that used to be there, you know? So, but there are plenty of sort of former farms that have been turned into housing for elderly. You know, and they look like farms, buildings still.
Yeah.
Single story, but with nice stuff above them to look like a farm roof and stuff. It can be very thoughtfully done.
Mm.
Yeah, Salisbury's got a great.
Design.
Just mentioned, you know,
Yeah.
talking about the farms,
Yeah,
this conference I went to, it was was a statewide chapter of the planning.
Oh, the one at
Association.
Wesleyan?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
down at the,
No.
Hotel and.
Middletown?
yeah, the Long Wharf Hotel there.
yeah.
But at lunch, I was sitting with a gentleman who his mother-in-law now owns that huge farm down at the end of Bethany.
Mhm.
And her husband died like 5 years ago. She wants to stay there, but he's already talking about what's gonna happen, and I mean, that's one of these things. Was that?
Not Mangers.
Well, right across from where Pine Brook Crossing comes in.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
Mangers.
Okay,
Yeah, the big farm and,
Yeah, but he's only been gone a year and,
or I don't know.
Yeah.
Right,
But you have to sit next to it. Yeah.
yeah,
right. But he was talking about the fact, because I think he lives over in Danbury or Bethel or something like that. They're helping her kind of manage the property. But I can only imagine at some point, if she decides she's gonna, I mean, any developer would look at that and say, beautiful,
Some of the
pristine land views and everything else like that. And I don't know if there's anything we could ever
Yeah.
help to do with that, but. I mean, that's one, I don't know how many acres, do you know how many acres that is?
I want to say 30.
There.
It's on the open space. Mhm. Okay.
Anyway, I didn't mean to digress, but, I mean, it's,
But she still owns that.
absolutely.
Yeah,
He was just telling me, he said, listen, this is what's gonna be coming down. So,
yeah.
because it, I mean, he and his wife spent a lot of time coming down to help her out. So, and I think I got that right in terms of the relationship, but
Yeah. Wonderful, yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think that that's kind of the crux of what we're talking about here. Lots of other towns are doing things. Typically, in every town, what is really needed is a small group or person that's kind of the focus point behind that whole thing. And I think this group, has a lot of really good people to fulfill that. I think that David Fink will tell you that too, that no town, I've had towns from Fairfield County and down along the shoreline call me and say, well, what do we do? And I'll say, who's in charge of the effort in your town? They say, well, we don't have anybody. I say, well, that's step one right there. So I think this group is a really good group to do that. I think having thoughtful people who understand 8-30G and not get all excited, just, if it ever comes. And I think the chances of an 8-30G coming here are probably slim because there's no sewer. That's basically it. And they can't get the density that they really need in order to make it very, very profitable. So I think that's really key.
Well, I think to that end, I actually look at it as reverse, which is one of the things I hope we can do is create a rationale and a direction that allows us to attract or have discussions with developers to attract them to want to look at Bethany, but do it in the context of how we'd like to move forward, not just we're coming in, we want to put 10 houses in 830G, you can't do anything.
I think that there are a lot of ways that can happen. And number one is to talk about things that we want to do first so that the initiative comes from our side rather than their side. So there are a few existing properties, for example, that might be converted, that might be appropriate for this. You know, we talked about the building next to the state police. for
Yes.
example.
I've been eyeballing that. so-
I've been in that.
What's that?
It's a
I've
scary
been
place.
thinking, eyeballing that.
I've been talking to
Is it
Ira
scary for you?
for
Oh, yeah.
5 years about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have pictures on my phone somewhere. Oh, God.
yeah, I think
Scary place.
we have
What?
to,
Yeah.
No windows?
I'm
looked
just,
at it.
I-
No, I mean,
Oh.
just because it's,
right,
Yeah.
but I just
Abandoned,
assume it's gonna,
right.
it'll get raised, whatever happens, that just comes down and then.
you just need to make sure that, you know, it's environmentally safe before we get too
Right.
deep into it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's key.
That's.
There was up in Route 22, north in New York, up by Wingdale, and there used to be a mental hospital up there. Structurally gorgeous, but the place has been abandoned for years because they've got so many environmental issues. They just
Yeah.
can't make it work.
like
Big,
big.
Yeah, it's a little scary inside. It's definitely right there.
Do you think people in town here are worried about something like 830G or P and Z or? I mean, sometimes I have wondered whether that's just sort of a red flag for people, but I don't like when you did the forum in another town, did he talk about? Did it ever come up in questions or is that something we should be prepared to?
Yeah, and
Sort of
Davis,
slightly talk about,
Yeah.
because it isn't such a terrible thing, in my opinion, but. You hear people talking about it, like, and I'm not sure they always know what they're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just recall I have nightmares sometimes about Greenhaven
Mm.
in the
Me too.
auditorium. I
Yeah,
mean, we
okay,
had,
so there's that still lurking.
so
there's
people,
memories there probably.
Yeah,
and I, you know, I don't know what, if half those people would come out now, saying the same thing came through or not, I don't know. But I just think it's
Okay.
very
so we might need to be
very
prepared.
important to present it properly, that's all. I think.
Were you speaking about, the Bob thing, was it?
Was that?
David Fink?
David thing?
Yeah,
As something that would be a presentation, not just to the committee, but to the town?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
An open
That's-
forum.
there's towns that are doing that now.
Yeah.
I've been reading about sometimes
Mhm.
calling in
Yeah.
speakers like that.
yeah.
Cause
David-
it's a sales
David-
job.
In
a way.
He's been to many, many towns already, and I'm sure he would be glad to come here. We talked to him and asked him. And you know, how we wanted it to focus and so on. I think it might be interesting. A really good amount of publicity before those things to get as many people to come as possible would be helpful.
I was worried too. I think when people hear affordable housing is always the.
Affordable development is the question.
And
Well, I think Alex has got the key there.
Yeah.
The Housing Advisory Committee, I think is
Yeah.
good and
Yeah.
I use the term attainable more often than affordable now because I
Mhm.
think that makes more sense. But I think this approach is an excellent one as well.
Mhm.
So again, there are tons of things that communities are doing. It really depends upon what we want to do here and what we think would be the most effective. And I'm happy to help facilitate that in any way. And
Mhm.
obviously, you know, there's a lot of expertise right here, Alex, so.
I've worried that, just one thing to be prepared, if he comes to speak, is that people are gonna throw, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I have nightmares about Greenhaven too.
Mm-hmm.
People are gonna throw the fact that that failed.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
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 I have a great
Say-
article from the Register that I kept
Mhm.
that went in depth on that. And they said there were multiple reasons for
There was
one.
one in New York Times too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's was the New York Times. I have it on my iPad. And they said the major factor was they didn't have a seasoned hardened developer.
Mhm.
And
Right,
that's what they needed all the time.
right.
And they never had one.
Right.
That
They
was
do it
one
on
of the
their own.
largest causes for their
Yeah,
disintegration.
I continue to feel very badly. I wake up sometimes at night, feel very badly for the people that pumped a lot of money into those
There's
units.
time, their lives into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand when we bring up other things and they come in and they're
When they're
cranky
selling
about
the
what
single
might
units
happen.
were not
Understand.
really
They were
that
that
expensive.
affordable.
No, they were like really.
Yeah, and maybe I shouldn't be overly concerned about it, but every time that discussion comes up and Maria is there.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
hard.
developers talk about how bad. I don't wanna re-traumatize the
Right.
people that
Yeah.
tried to do something, so.
Yeah.
Any way that we can sort of navigate the discussion and say, you know, it's built, it's there, we're trying to figure out how do we maximize utility for the benefit of the town.
Mhm.
Or not talk about that particular. Either. If
Someone
there are
will bring it
other
up.
sites, I know, but
For
it's,
sure.
that's
Right.
different. I mean, if we start with that, inviting that
Mm.
remembrance,
Right.
whatever people remember about.
Well, I think two things. I think one, we can certainly brief David before he talks, if he agrees to
Yeah.
talk. And secondly, if it starts to get cranky, I'm happy to step in and kind of smooth it over. I think we can do that.
I think Alex's response just now was about right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you changed the direction of that.
Yeah.
In one sentence,
Yeah.
practically, and
Yeah.
that's what has to be done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it is, I think I mean. Gotta remember, this is all being taped, no, I'm teasing, but basically, I think it's one thing to have people try to build something. Honestly, in their vision for themselves, which is what it was, without professional development help. It's another thing, if you look at the Litchfield County groups.
Yep.
They're doing it for mission, if you will, or for a community purpose, not
Yeah.
for themselves. And that separation
That's very
can
true.
really be helpful
Yeah.
for success.
Right.
Because it's,
Cause you're not blinded by,
yeah, nor are you harmed by it
Yeah.
in that same.
and that's really the difference between those kinds of projects
Yeah,
and an 8-30G where a developer comes in and says, well, I'm gonna do what I want. That means we need to plug into what the community needs and you folks know, certainly
Yep.
better than anybody, just how that will fit in. I think the conversion of some existing properties, and then maybe some property around, and maybe some old barns, and maybe some old houses around that aren't being taken care of, maybe the people are, maybe they're gonna be a tax sale, whatever. There could be a number of different things that could be looked at. So it's kind of an intensive look at what's currently existing in town and how those could be converted into maybe 2, 3, 4 units as well.
well, that's like the Holy House that my in-laws owned.
yes,
You know, it's a historic house. It's,
Mm,
I think it's 4 units. You know.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, Rhode Island did that big time in the 90s.
Mm.
yeah, I was
They were selling timeshares every one to go.
Oh,
What
really?
is the property that on Cheshire Road that had the daycare and it had also 3 apartment units
On Cheshire Road or Sperry Road?
Oh, Sperry?
Sperry Road.
Sperry Road,
Mhm.
Sperry Road,
That's another one.
Sperry Road,
Mhm.
that it's still. Existing.
Off topic, but on topic. Whatever happened with the property right across the street from you? Did they ever, or they continue to try to market it as commercial property? They approached us about a year ago about
Oh, it's-
duplex.
Which property?
It's
Right
on
across the street
63
from
across my
Kim's.
office.
Used to be
Ah.
Beth Evans property.
Right, it was Beth Evans building.
What's that?
It was Beth Evans building. I think trying to remember what she told me.
Well, they have a sign out there, you know,
Oh.
phone number available.
She was supposed to enter a site plan and she never came through with that. I insisted on that. She still uses it as like originally because there were accessory offices in there or in one accessory apartment. I think she's using that still as a reason for rental. But I did tell her if she's gonna do the dwellings, she needed to enter the site plan. And that's where it was left at.
Okay.
I was pretty disappointed to hear some people come out and really oppose that. I thought, the building has been there, kind of in poor shape for a long time. That would be a really good
Yeah.
thing for it to do.
I think some of the objections I heard were just wishful thinking, you know, it's BNI, we want to keep it commercial, we need the business, and it's just, you know what, the market has told you they don't want that, so.
Yep.
Keeping an eye, we've got,
Actually, that's not a very good
yeah, I
luck.
know, I gotta go my watch. We got
Look
about
at
10
it.
minutes left,
Mhm.
Time
Um,
was
so anything that you want to wrap up?
No,
with?
I'm good. I just think there are tons of things that we can accomplish and we can do and different directions we can take. And I'm happy to help you with any of them at all. Happy to do that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other related to what Colin's laid out, and again, Leslie, given your background and experience, any other ideas, thoughts? What I'm trying to do, and I hope we can start with this meeting and again, whether it's today or our next meeting, begin to grab 1 or 2 ideas that we think have a lot of promise and then make that a focus, because if we try to do 6 different things, I don't think we're going to get
Mhm.
very far. So Leslie, anything else?
No, I would wonder whether, you know, whether that map sort of approach would be a logical next step. I don't know how quickly we could get something like
Should be able
that
to
to
get that
look
in
at, but it would be a nice thing
That would be great.
to tie to this discussion, so we can look at it.
Gives you a quick
Be
focus.
practical.
And we have a
I mean,
list.
from my point of view, the takeaway for tonight is partly that it's comforting to know there's small towns engaged in this stuff, but that what we already have in zoning regs is adaptable, flexible enough, presumably at the point that we are at. So that we don't have to focus on, let's bring in this weakness that we don't have and redo this or something like that.
Yeah.
So then it's really practical. Do we have anything to look at? What do we think about here, you know?
Yeah.
So I'd love to do that next if we can, if we can time it that way.
I'll work with Lynn and we'll see if we can get that together. It should be easy to do.
So
Does that make sense, Alex?
Yeah, no, it does. So just to kind of build up on that. Hiram, based on what we have a framework for the commission to be able to engage in a discussion. So if we think one of these district concepts is a good vehicle on which we can start to pursue something, it doesn't require the commission to take action to create those regs. It would require them to start taking action to say, you have to designate. Now you have to start the process of figuring out where would this go.
It's a
Is that-
planning rather than a zoning.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's why I think that the least amount of tweaking on the regs that we can get by with is the best way to do it.
I agree.
A question on that, though, were you saying that the holy grail is that, the minimum size of a lot, no matter where we go or what we
No,
do,
no.
couldn't change?
Frankly, I think you could have maybe an old house that maybe somebody is moved out of, maybe they can't afford it anymore, whatever. And that house alone on a small lot could become 2 or 3 units. On the other hand, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 acres, you can do a little bit different project. So I think it's completely variable. You just need to be sensitive to what will fit well in the community on that particular
Mhm.
parcel. So I think projects big and small can be great, and I think the smaller ones are easier, no
Yeah.
question. Kind of medium projects is where I would hope we would end up somewhere.
But that these would allow us to
Yep.
do that within this, without having to change a lot of this.
I think so too, and I think I'll take another hard look at those,
Yeah.
next week or so.
So let me, related to that, and again, not I expect to tackle immediately. But for a 2 acre lot, for zoning regs, it's 2 acres of buildable land.
Mhm.
So if you think about a lot that has maybe a quarter of it is wetlands, but 3/4 of it is perfectly fine. Should we think also about trying to modify the restrictions around you have to figure out how to get 2 acres of buildable land, even though you don't want to use 2 acres to build?
Yeah, I think I will take another hard look at these ones that you just pointed out, Alex, and see if there's ways to get around that. I think that, wetland is obviously gonna be involved if there's wetlands on the property.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you'd have to respect all the setbacks and everything else like that. I'm just simply saying, um, why have to create? So, to get the 2 acres, you may have to designate the lot to be 2.5 acres to get that requirement of 2 acres of buildable land.
Mhm.
Is that an impediment that serves the greater community good, or does it just create an obstacle that thwarts potential development?
I think the attainable housing overlay zone, for example, is very flexible, extremely flexible with regard to things like setbacks and lot sizes, things like that. The other ones I'd have to take a hard look at, they're specifically aimed at things like elderly, so they would have a specific focus anyway.
And you'd have to see, I would push back and say, why would you need the 2.5? Unless it's going to be affordable. So how you tie that to that question is otherwise.
Which would be,
Enough mention will
a
pop
per-
up on that.
which
So
would be-
what are we doing talking about that?
that'd be,
That's,
that'd be,
that's,
that'd be a perfect solution to say that you can get relief from that
if
requirement
it's affordable.
if you're gonna do something affordable or includes something.
First time owner, I mean, it can be affordable to whom? Somebody who earns 80% of the area median, which around here could be a family starting out, you know,
Mm.
it's.
Are the builders, because I've read that there are, and I don't know about in Connecticut, that can build a project meeting, building, um, you know, um, building specs, but to a price that could come out to be affordable.
And usually no,
No,
bricks
okay.
and mortar, sticks and, it's all gonna cost the same. The difference is how you finance it. It's really not how you build it.
Okay,
Yeah, cause
not even
wood is
modular,
wood, and
Yeah.
that's even gonna be more expensive, so.
not even modular?
No, I
Do you have
mean,
an
I
approach?
think, no, not on its own. It doesn't make
Yeah.
it more affordable. Because it is reality.
Yeah.
You know,
There-
from a
there-
contracting point of view.
Yeah, there are companies now, there's a company out west called Boxable, which is building kind of interesting stuff now, but it's so modern looking, I'm not sure.
It
people would
wouldn't
hear
fit
it.
here.
It's
Yeah.
like
I mean, they can erect those things
I
in
mean,
like 5 hours.
a
of the
section
property.
eight would not fit.
But,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
that's
just
less
don't-
than
It's like
affordable.
tiny houses
Isn't
and
that
stuff.
less
There's
than
always
affordable
pads
to the
or,
medium
you
income
know,
here in
Yeah.
But who
town?
wants to live in
Okay.
them from
yeah,
very few
Yeah.
people, so
Yeah.
I honestly think we build to the standard in the community, which is a diverse standard. Here we have a fair variety of types of housing in there, but we build it as quality, and it's the financing
Mm.
that allows it to stay or be affordable.
Okay. So general agreement, I think you've suggested, the maps would be a wonderful
okay,
starting point for discussion to understand the town and what kind of opportunities might be out there for us to think about.
And if we could even have say, like, when we look at something, could one of these work there and how would it,
Mhm.
just for play purposes,
Yeah.
not because
Yeah.
we have any idea we actually would do it, something or
Right.
encourage it.
I'll work with Lena, as I said, the next few days, and we'll get something to you before your next meeting.
Great.
That'd be great.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts, comments, or our consideration for next meeting?
Good.
We're good? Are you full? Did we fill you up? Kim was telling us that we're for dinner. She's missing.
Oh, no.
That's.
A busy day.
Don't be angry. Yeah.
Okay.
These are all good things to.
Just to throw out one more thing, because not because we need to think about it tonight, but just because otherwise I'll forget it. Which is, are people still doing surveys, do you know, Hiram, and is that something we would ever consider doing? I know when I worked at
It surveyed
JB
the
Gardner
town.
a long time ago, about senior housing needs in town, and we did do a survey, and it was a useful thing, and I just didn't
Well, we
know.
did one on the committee we were on.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did a surveys, I've become a little bit, I don't know, opposed, but just very, very sensitive about it. You put it out there, people are, last one we had, people were using their magic markers to write no and big letters all over the thing.
yeah, yeah.
And I think it's the kind of issue where unless you can kind of control the discussion, the survey can kind of get out of hand.
Mhm.
That's just my initial feeling.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to want one, I just wondered, because it used to be something people would do sometimes.
When plans of development are redone, and one of these days we'll redo ours. It's probably something we can do then, we kind of stretch the issues out, but my suggestion is that
Not,
on this particular issue, it can kind of get out of hand pretty quickly.
Have you had a chance to look at the results of last?
I think so, but it was.
It was included in the, as an appendix
When we
to
did
the
the first
affordable
committee.
housing.
Yeah.
Actually, I was a little surprised, but I thought it was more positive than I was expecting to see the results.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was 5 years ago. so
Right, and
that's-
so I think part of what we can do, and I'm not opposed to
Sure.
another one, but we can use what came out of that to say, when we ask these questions, here's how people
Yeah.
responded. And maybe that's part of what goes into the form that you're talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
so.
Cool.
Okay,
I don't want to be negative either. I've just been beat up so many times.
well, we
Yeah, that was
also.
like you in your shoes.
We also, if you remember, Leslie, we had a sort of a wild card on our,
Yeah, we did.
who,
Oh, yeah.
he was, I mean, Kim's the one that alerted me to it, but he was putting out on Facebook to say, this is a total fraud, this is fixed, this is.
I remember
everything.
some of those discussions. I couldn't
So-
quite believe it.
When you have that dynamic, that's why you get people with a
Yes.
big no.
Yeah. I hope it's moved.
Pitchforks.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna move, we adjourn. How's that?
Okay, anybody opposed to that idea? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Slow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I didn't, I started last week and we ran a race together. Sort of together. Yeah.